Akhwale, the chair of the COVID-19 vaccines task force here in Kenya, as we engage him on matters COVID-19 vaccines deployment. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us.
Thank you very much, Purity. My pleasure to be on prime time.
And when we received our first consignment of the vaccines sometime in March, the AstraZeneca vaccine, there were concerns. The CS actually said some of the reasons why we could not get other types of vaccines, especially Pfizer, was the issue to do with storage. Maybe you can begin by addressing that. Do we have, as a country, the capacity to store any type of a vaccine that we may receive any time from now?
Yeah, so thank you very much. The very first deployment plan, which we have now since revised, looked at the stages towards an effective deployment of COVID-19 vaccine. And we had what we called the introduction period, which was that period between March and June this year, recognizing that we needed to deploy first vaccines that are easy to store, that are easy to be administered. We recognized that there are vaccines like the Pfizer and Moderna that required a little bit of more logistical infrastructure to be put in place. So, and we are happy that, yes, the first phase was relatively smooth. The biggest challenge we had was just the supply. But from July, we began our second phase. And in this one, we've been enhancing the cold chain. You saw today in your news, we've now got deep freezers, which can store the Pfizer. Last week, we've actually deployed Moderna, which requires also freezing, but much better temperatures, higher temperatures of -20. And we are expecting the first 1 million doses of Pfizer next week, and we'll be good to go.
We'll be good to go. Now, would you confirm that as a country now we have the right infrastructure to store the 6 kinds of vaccines approved by the World Health Organization?
Yes, we are now good. We can now administer all the 6. Actually, in Kenya, we'll be deploying 5. AstraZeneca, Moderna has followed, Johnson has just followed, and then Pfizer next week. And later in this month of September, we expect Sinopharm, also which has been approved by WHO. All these are possible. However, let me say that it's important to note that we are also still undertaking vaccination for children. We cannot overload the system and leave children unvaccinated. That is not going to be moral. I know COVID is scaring adults in particular, it's killing us, but we are not going to go into a situation where we use all the space that is available just to vaccinate only on COVID. And that is why today you had the cabinet saying very specific measures that will ensure we are scaling up COVID-19 vaccination, but not interfering with the vaccination of children.
All right. And why the 5? Why not the 6 vaccines that have been approved by the World Health Organization?
We could. So what basically happens is that within the COVAX mechanism, they usually give us a quarterly forecast and tell us we have this number of this vaccine, this. So in Kenya, you've been allocated this type and this type. Are you able to get, how many quantities are you able to bring? And we do then request for them. Sinovac at the time, it may not have been, one of the things about Sinovac is that it's very close also to Sinopharm, but our healthcare workers have already been trained on Sinopharm, and we're expecting an initial donation. So we will then be able to easily deploy it. But in future, when there are enough doses, even of Sinovac, we can bring. And obviously, as then our program goes on, we will have to really say which are the most suitable, which ones are easy to administer, which ones go where. And our revised deployment plan is now really asking counties to identify which vaccines best suits which facility.
And when you began receiving donations of the AstraZeneca doses, there was a time, there were claims that Kenya received some doses that had expired. Was it anything to do with expiry, or that African country had lacked probably storage capacity?
At no time has Kenya ever received expired vaccines. First and foremost, nobody would even export expired vaccines. It is important to note that the whole issue of vaccines is tightly controlled by the Global Alliance on Vaccines and Immunization, Gavi, and the World Health Organization that ensures the quality of these vaccines. Vaccines are very special. In fact, their quality is monitored right from the manufacturing, and it is monitored all the way through transportation. There are special monitors that even monitor how the vaccines are moving. If you work with some of our staff, and I'll welcome you when you come to Afya House, you will get people with phones that can tell you which truck and the temperature that these vaccines are moving. Okay. And if there's anything, there'll always be an alert. So let me say it has never been. The issue of near expiry is that COVID-19 vaccines have a shelf life of 6 months. So from production to the time you administer, there's a lot of logistics in terms of packing and everything. So even the very best vaccines will be 4 to 5 months. However, remember, in the initial stages, there was the rich countries that had booked the vaccines. They had booked the supply chain. So when they vaccinated their populations and started releasing, they were giving us. The good thing in Kenya is that we had built capacity that even if we got vaccines that were like a month or 6 weeks, we are able to utilize them before they expire.
And how about the storage at the counties? Because right now we are seeing with the mass vaccination exercise or campaign by the ministry, we are seeing counties storing vaccines. Do they have the capacity to do that?
You have asked
health facilities in particular.
Yes,
yeah.
You have asked a good question and even qualified much better.
Yes.
The most important point of vaccination is the vaccination post. That is the refrigerator that is down there in that rural health facility. How many types of vaccine can it carry? Vaccines are not just packed like food in a refrigerator. There are specific places where you place which vaccine. There is the temperatures. They are graded. They have labels. They'll be colored and they'll be told put this here. That is where we still have a constraint, because those fridges and supply and cold chain were meant for childhood vaccination. We are riding on that, and that is what we are overloading. And that is why in today's speech, the Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe said we will go for 1,177 facilities to expand that. Basically meaning having to buy new refrigerators there. But we're also recognizing there's something called turnaround time. You see, at the moment, counties have to go to the regional stores. So a county like Turkana has to go to Eldoret to get, occasionally we airlift vaccines there. So what we want to do, we are looking at strategic counties, 25 of them, to put up what we call walk-in cold rooms, which means they can have the capacity to store, and therefore counties can quickly be able to go and get vaccines without having to waste a lot of time to pick them. Yes.
And while on that challenge, do we have counties that are yet to begin this, drive due to the storage, or what you're explaining, the challenges that may come with the storage?
No, at the moment, given the capacity we have, and given the arrangements that have been made, and you will see that all counties have started vaccinating with AstraZeneca. All counties can now vaccinate with Moderna. It is only Pfizer that will require very special attention, but we are trying to get a way out of it. Number one, of course, the storage is at -70. Now, the freezers that came today, they are going to those regional stores. But once we've removed the Pfizer vaccine, it is administered at 2 to 8 degrees. However, you cannot transport Pfizer for more than 12 hours. So you have to calculate the distance from the regional store to the facility you go. If it is more than 12 hours, you will not immunize with Pfizer. Secondly, the vaccine, Pfizer, once it is stored, meaning it is no longer frozen, it has to be used within 28 days. So we will not place those vaccines in places that don't have a lot of people presenting for vaccination.
Right. So let's address the issue of efficacy, because we've been seeing figures, Pfizer 95%, 80%, and some people will say, I will wait for this jab because it's more, effective as compared to the other, and you're on record saying any vaccine, you know, can prevent you from getting the disease. Maybe you can clarify this.
I will start by saying there's no superior vaccine unqualified. There are COVID-19 vaccine, unqualified. And there are two words I really want to try and explain as simple as I can: efficacy and effectiveness. So during clinical trials, the vaccines, you have what you call endpoints. What do you want to achieve? So there are two endpoints that clinical trials looked at. Prevention of severe disease, hospitalization and death was one endpoint. The other one was prevention of transmission, mild to moderate transmission. Now, the prevention of severe disease, all the vaccines were 100%. None was better than the other. When it comes to prevention of transmission, that's where you start hearing one is 92%, one is 67%, one is 80%. That is prevention of mild moderate disease. Now, that parameter, however, can have very many confounding factors. It may depend on which time it was done, where was it done. So like in Kenya, you know, last year, let's say December, January, there was very little of COVID here. And if somebody assessed a vaccine, they would say it's my vaccine that really reduced that. But it was just the natural cycle of the disease. But if you did it in March when we had the third wave here, it may not have reduced as many. Now, there's one thing I would want to tell people, and they can Google, even Professor Google will tell you, there has been no study that compared vaccine A, B, and C to say which one is better. It's only that they have been done at different times. Remember, these vaccines were developed within a year, and therefore nobody has that luxury to have done that. Prevention of disease, severe disease, is the most important parameter that we don't lose life.
And with the 5 expected types of vaccines in the country, will Kenyans have a choice, you know, a chance to make the decision on what jab they would want, or that decision will lie on the ministry?
Let me, and I've used this phrase a little bit now, that in terms of scarcity, there's no cherry picking. And even if you go to the developed countries, when they also didn't have enough vaccine, the important thing is that the vaccine that is nearest to you, the vaccine that is in your arm, is the best vaccine. Take it. You may want to be saying, I'm waiting until I get this, and the next thing you are in an ICU, and you regret why you never got a vaccine. Right. Remember, we are now getting data even from some of the private hospitals that most of the people who are admitted are the unvaccinated. The same thing in the US. So we need people to get this vaccine. For us, our guidance and our operating principle is this. We are going to allocate a vaccine to a facility. Small facilities will have only one type of vaccine. Big facilities may have 2 or 3 types, but they must be administered from totally different parts of the facility. In fact, today I was reading some reports from other countries. You know, the conditions for administering Moderna are different from Pfizer, and you don't want to have them at the same place.
Right.
So for you, once you go to the change system, and once you register, and once you present yourself, the vaccine in that facility that is available is the vaccine you must accept.
And the Minister of Health is yet to approve the mix and match, you know, mix and matching vaccines, because people are asking, if I got AstraZeneca as a first dose, can I get Johnson & Johnson, you know, or Pfizer?
At the moment, that is not a policy. It's not a recommendation by the Minister of Health. We know that there have been some studies that have shown that mixing could have better immunogenicity, but the data remains limited. It's not adequate. Even the World Health Organization has pronounced itself and said this data is not yet adequate. However, they had said in case you really have shortage of vaccines, you could consider. Now here in Kenya, the way we are now moving, you will see we are reserving. We got Moderna, we now got the second dose. When we get Pfizer, we'll reserve a second dose. AstraZeneca, we are going to get adequate doses. In fact, currently, it's going to be available everywhere. So you just need to present yourself and get a second shot. When all of this data is available, analyzed, and expert opinion is given, then we'll pronounce ourselves as to how we go about it.
And as we speak, maybe how do you intend to roll out these vaccines? Because when we started, there was a delay, especially those who had received the first jab of AstraZeneca in March. We experienced a delay for reasons that were explained from India. But right now, do you assure Kenyans, especially who will be receiving their first doses from the new jabs, Moderna and Pfizer, that they will get their second doses on time?
Absolutely. This is something we have seriously considered as we made our development plan, and we are referring to it as reserving the second dose. So what we are doing is that, like Moderna, we got 800,000 doses, we released them. The ones we got yesterday, we are going to release them a week before people start getting the second dose. So the facility where you went, we will give them, allocate them an equivalent when the time for the second dose comes. Same with Pfizer. With AstraZeneca, I can assure Kenyans that that supply is now increasing, and it will always be available now to be given at 8 weeks. Remember, it can be given 8 to 12 weeks. So by the time of 8 weeks, our chanjo system and other methods will be used to remind you to go for the second. So one of the things is that our chanjo system will send you alerts 48 hours to the time you're supposed to get your second dose. We are telling Kenyans they must be fully vaccinated, not to get only one dose and start hoping to change to another vaccine.
Yeah, and what's your target in regard to rolling out? How many people do you, target to vaccinate by what time, and what's the uptake? Are Kenyans turning up in large numbers as you expected?
Oh, in fact, they are turning up in extremely large numbers. People turning up, the cabinet secretary said it's now not the problem. The problem is to get the right, all the quantities at the right time.
Yeah.
Actually, by morning, I wake up and I get photos, people telling me at 6 a.m. we had 300 people, but we have been given 50 vials. We want to change that. Our aim, and it is a target set by His Excellency the President, is to have 10 million people vaccinated by the end of this year.
And how many have you vaccinated?
Right
so
now we are at the 3 million mark.
All right.
And we have 5 million doses. So we believe by September we'll have hit the 5 million mark. And therefore October, November and December, with the increased supply, that is a target we are going to meet. Our principle is vaccinate as many people and as quickly as possible, because we want the economy to open up.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Willis Akhwale, for making time for us. Thank you once again for coming. We appreciate.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's it for our tonight's interview. Thank you for staying with us. We still have more news coming up shortly. Stay with Prime Edition.